So, Mr. Jackson, you owned slaves, correct? Around 100 to 150,
Yes.
somewhere around there, right?
Yep.
And that shows you didn't believe in equality between races, correct?
Well, certain races. I mean, I had full rights to use blacks as slaves.
All right, keeping that in mind, let's move on. You fought in the Battle of Horseshoe Bend at a previous clash with the Indians, right?
Correct.
So there was, in fact, that rivalry from the beginning. But aside from that, as your attorney was questioning you yesterday, you said that you adopted a Native American son, Lankoya, right?
Yeah, yes, I did.
Did you consider your son, your adopted son, and his people inferior to you?
I did. I thought the Native Americans were inferior to me, but I got Lankoya when he was 3 years old, so he was raised like an American.
Okay, very well. Your Honor, I would like to present Exhibit A. Is there any chance you could pull that up?
Sure. Is it under prosecution?
It is.
Which one is exhibit A? Because you have a lot of exhibits.
So it's all, if you go all the way down to the last. It's way last. So, right there. Oh, wait, correct. So, this was your 5th annual message to Congress, and in it you had stated that these people are barbaric and savage. Your son's people were barbaric and savage, but how? Not only did these people have farms, schools, but they had a developed constitution, their own form of government, as well as a capital city. Is that really savage, Mr. Jackson?
Yes,
How?
because they only adopted those ways. They started to adopt the ways when the whites came in. So we had these ways much before them. Their ways were not fully developed yet. They were still savage.
Their ways were not fully developed, but when the Americans came to Jamestown, they weren't fully developed either. Do you stop them from developing right there, if you were there?
Objection, Your Honor, the question is irrelevant.
Sustained.
All right, well, you also stated in your first inaugural address, it will be my sincere and constant desire to observe toward the Indian tribes within our limits a just and liberal policy, and to give that humane and considerate attention to their rights and their wants, which is consistent with the habits of our government and the feelings of our people, right?
Yes.
But the Indians, as one of our witnesses had said, were also uprooted from their homes and separated from their families, as well as, in cases, killed, correct?
Yes.
How is that humane treatment?
Is more humane than what would have happened if we had left them there. Many more of them would have died if they had stayed there and clashed with the whites. We did the right thing.
Well, you mentioned that again yesterday. You were talking about your first annual message and how that the Native Americans, they would have died, and you had to get them, quote unquote, out of there before the whites killed them, right?
Yes.
Well, on the Trail of Tears, the many natives, your attorney stated that they all died of weather, but many of the natives were simply not provided with the resources to stay alive. Blankets. Blankets could have protected them from weather. 1/4 of the Indians, 1/4 of the Indians on the Trail of Tears had died.
Yes.
Correct?
Mhm.
And you said you'd compensate for land and resource losses. But how do you compensate for those lives?
Many lives were lost, but many more lives would have been lost if they had stayed there.
That's a very good argument, but you losing a loved one, as I'm sure you lost your son Lankoya, your adopted son who you supposedly loved very much, you can't compensate for a life. And if these Indians, Chief Red Jacket had said, brothers, our seats were once large and yours were small. This is while he was talking to whites. You have now become a great people, and we have scarcely a place left to spread our blankets. You've got our country, but are not satisfied. You want to force your religion upon us. Brothers, we only want to enjoy our own. Mr. Jackson, this shows that these people felt oppressed inside. Do you really think that somebody who feels oppressed can express and feel freedom, whether it's given to them or not?
Yes.
How? If you're feeling oppressed, how can you feel freedom?
We did not oppress them as much. There was a treaty in this act, and we treated them as their own nation, and I don't think they were oppressed as much as you say they were.
I beg to differ. Lives were lost. Sons were separated from mothers. Their rights taken away. They were put at gunpoint when your soldiers went and asked them to move.
1 minute.
So, moving on. Mr. Jackson, do you think that nullifying a law passed by Congress is a state right?
No.
No, but also the 10th Amendment states that any right that's not stated in the Constitution is in fact a state right. Correct?
Anything that is not passed by the national government is not a state right.
Okay, but beyond that, you were on your witness stand yesterday, and you mentioned that when you passed the tariff of 1832, the Southerners still weren't pleased, right?
Yes.
Well, you simply lowered the tax, and you were still messing with their economy. What did you think that would do?
Can you repeat the question?
What did you think this would do? You'd already messed up their economy.
I don't believe I messed up their economy.
Well, when, let's say they were buying a shovel, right? This shovel from Europe was cheaper, but that tariff, previous tariff, it stopped the Southerners from getting that shovel. Instead, they had to buy the price was raised because it was coming from the Northerners.
Your counsel, can you please ask a question? This is your final question.
So, Mr. Jackson, you said that the threat of secession may have been unconstitutional, and wasn't impeding on state rights as well?
We're not impeding on their rights. The state is part of a union, and they need to obey the union, but they also have their own rights. Nullification is different than state rights.
And that's all we have.
I say a quote right now.
You're off the stand, unfortunately. Sorry, buddy.
Sorry.
And now we have the defense team would like to call up their first witness.
The defense would like to call John Burnett to the stand.
How you doing today, Forum?
Oh, can you say that?
Wonderful. What do you have?
In your testimony yesterday, you described the harsh conditions that the Cherokee had to endure based on the great length shown on the Cherokee Removal map. The same map also illustrates that the route passes by several water sources. Do you find that route to be unfair?
No. But what I do find unfair was that it was during the winter.
Okay, fair enough. In your testimony, you also stated the following quote, "I did not meet one who was a moral prostitute. They're kind and tender-hearted." This quote was in response to the question, how would you describe the Native Americans? Do you find the statement to be fair and that it describes all Native Americans?
Well, I believe it's how you treat the Native Americans, and they will treat you in that way back. If you treat them by stealing their lands and raping and pillaging their people, they're not kind and tender-hearted people. So I guess it depends on how you treat them.
Regardless of how you treat them, do you think they're capable of hostile behavior?
I think everyone's capable of hostile behavior. So, in that, yes.
Also, in your testimony, you stated a quote from your biography in the People versus Andrew Jackson packet. Do you know when this letter was written?
Not off the top of my head. I was 80 years old at the time. I'm schizophrenic.
This letter was written 50 years after the fact.
Yes, it was.
Something written 15 years later, do you find that to be concrete evidence?
What I do find it to be is that it was 50 years ago. And that was a very traumatic time in my life. So I do agree that I had a pretty good memory of it.
Okay. What was your job as an American soldier?
My job was to watch and make sure the Native Americans got there safely. Oh,
Would you say the natives treated you well? Were you friends?
yes, because I treated them in the same way.
So they welcomed you with open arms, and yet here you are convincing the jury to be sympathetic towards them, but you didn't do anything to help them, did you?
That is a false statement. I did. I did as much as I could to help them while retaining my job. And years after, as I recall, when I met up with them, they called me the man who cared for us.
The man who cared what?
Cared for us.
In what way did you help them?
I provided blankets when I could, when I was on duty. I always tried to be nice to them. I saw a old man getting slashed by a whip, and I put a stop to it. And for that, I had a gash on my face.
1 minute.
Okay. Your general stated the following. Do you know who your general is?
Refresh my memory.
General Winfield Scott. He stated the following address to the Cherokees. Soldiers are as kind-hearted as brave, and their desire of every one of them is to execute our duty in mercy. We're commanded by the president to act towards you in that spirit. While some soldiers didn't exactly obey their orders, how can you blame Andrew Jackson for something a few of the soldiers took part in?